You're listening to Empire by Design, episode 72.
Hey, I'm Katie White, coach, consultant, transformation facilitator, action taker, empire builder, and this is Empire by Design. In this show, we're building empires, we're sharing stories, and we're getting up close and personal on the strategies that make an empire in today's online world. Get all the show notes, past episodes and more at katiewyatt.me. For now, settle in for the ride. We have made it to the final part in our Should I Start a Podcast summer series. If you're only just joining us, please go back to part 1, episode 68, and join us for the whole journey, the real-time, real-life journeys of plant-based health coach Anna Chisholm, who did my podcasting course because she wanted to grow her audience, her reach, her community, and her brand, and so she launched her podcast, Big Impact. This is the final part, and at the end I'll tell you a little bit more about the course that Anna did to launch her podcast, and I'll also tell you about Podcast Empire, the membership community I run to support podcasters and those getting ready to launch. But for now, let's dive into the final episode of Should I Start a Podcast with Anna Chisholm. This summer series is brought to you by Podwell, the course that helps entrepreneurs like you gain more attention, more audience, authority, and advocates with a podcast. You can read all about it and sign up at www.podcastempires.com/join Podwell. Welcome back to Empire by Design, Anna Chisholm.
Thank you, Katie Wyatt. How are you?
I am awesome and so excited because the podcast series is live. We are literally recording this final episode after part 4 has gone live. Nothing like leaving it to the last minute. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but have you listened back to the series?
I sure have. Yeah,
awesome.
I have. It's really fun, actually. I mean, once you get over the hideousness of listening to your own voice, it's actually been really good. Like, I've really enjoyed listening to it and, sharing it with my friends and family and stuff. I think it's pretty funny. And it's just awesome to look back at how far I've come, I think is the main thing.
Yeah. And it's so rare that we get to hear what we were thinking at the time that we were thinking it and reflect it back to us. So has anything stood out to you as in, oh my goodness, I mentioned that but didn't realize it would become so important, or that was so important to me and it's not important to me at all anymore? Anything like that?
Well, the cover art, I can't believe how much I stressed about that. I think that's pretty funny. But do you know what? The graphics and the art actually still stresses me out. Not the cover art, but, it's taken me a while. But finally now I've kind of got a consistent look, I guess, or design for when I'm promoting my episodes. But it's taken me, however long to actually get that underway. So I think I always avoid anything designy. So I'm not that surprised that it stressed me out, but it's funny looking back at that's what I was focusing on. Maybe get some interviews first and then, Anyway, that was pretty funny. What else? this is weird, but I just really liked how excited we were last episode about, me launching and getting top 10.
We were so excited.
But it is exciting. And it's kind of nice listening back to it, thinking it's cool to celebrate your wins, and it actually means a lot to have done that with someone else as well, live, to go, do you know what? You and I, not just me, you and I and Benny Chiz did a really good job at getting it up and running and up in the top 10. So yeah, really pleased with that.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. And I guess what I wanted to talk about today, because you've got 29 episodes on your podcast now, and I think that we started this conversation, we were just saying before, in around June or July 2016, and it's now almost February 2017. So it's a good 6 months. And I know that what I really want to kind of understand from you is where do you feel the podcast is at now? And where's your business at now? Like, what's changed? What have been the biggest changes since we first started talking?
Yeah, my business and my direction has changed in a big way. And I honestly put that down to the podcast. So in a really positive way. Once I started the podcast, and I guess as I progressed from, people I know quite well, having them on the podcast, or friends of friends, in the wellness industry, to now progressing to, my most recent episode was with the immediate past president of the American College of Cardiology. So like the top cardiologist basically in the United States, who follows a plant-based diet and is a huge advocate of that. But it's done two things. First of all, it's just built my confidence, and I've just continued to enjoy the whole process of podcasting and finding my way to express myself and get my point across and my opinions, and I guess be a platform for other people to do that as well. So that it's still, and it keeps becoming a really enjoyable part of my business. So I'm really grateful for that. And then it's also helped me niche down on who my target market is. Like, I think before the podcast, I was working mainly with mums, and it kind of in a bit of a general sense, like it was to do with health, it was to do with weight loss. It was kind of, and it still is people's very individual goals. But now I'm far more focused on people who are transitioning to a plant-based diet, and, in particular, cardiac patients who've had a heart attack or who have heart disease and are willing to make big changes in their diet and lifestyle to try and treat or, even in some cases reverse this cardiac disease. So I've found my passion, and I've been focusing in on that in a big way. And I was saying to my friends yesterday that, they always say, like, you've got to find your niche, or the riches are in the niches if you're in America. And, like, you kind of believe that in theory, but then it's not until you actually do that you're like, oh my God, this is so powerful. So, now that I've actually said no to a few coaching clients who don't fit really what I want to do anymore, and now I've narrowed right down to what I'm interested in. It's so funny how all these opportunities kind of arise from that once you get really clear on what you want to do. So that's kind of been the other side of it, which has just been absolutely amazing for me this year so far.
And so how have you seen, I mean, you've talked about the podcast being really the driver of that strategic shift for you, but have you seen it also bringing people to you? Like, what sort of engagement are you finding that you're getting from the podcast?
Yeah. I've had way more requests for coaching with me. So, people just kind of contacting me randomly without me putting any other sort of advertisement or, I'm pretty consistent with like my Facebook posts or whatever on my business page and my Instagram and things, but I used to be far more consistent with other things, or, advertising my coaching or kind of putting offers out there and those sorts of things. But since I've had the podcast and kind of are teaching people what I'm all about and what I believe in and what I stand for and what I can help with, I'm teaching them that through the podcast. I haven't had to I'm going to say waste time with all the stuff, only because it was a waste of time for me, I think, because I didn't do it well. Whereas I think the podcast, I do it well, and so I don't have to put effort into all these other little areas, if that makes sense.
That's excellent. And so I guess what I'd love to know is, like, where you're at now then, where you've got much more clarity about your business direction and things are starting to gain some momentum in that area. What is, looking forward, what's the biggest challenge for you now in how you step forward with the business and how the podcast supports that?
It's interesting. I'm super happy where everything is going. I've got, a few things on the horizon in terms of my business. in the sense that I'm collaborating with people, other people in the industry, other, quite influential people. And I don't think I would have had that opportunity if I hadn't started the podcast, because first of all, some of them I've actually interviewed to be on my podcast, so they've got to know me that way. And others, within the plant-based space, particularly in terms of whole food, plant-based eating for health, not just veganism, in general, but specifically whole food, plant-based for health. Like, I'm probably, besides from another man called Clint Patterson, who focuses just on rheumatoid arthritis, I'm probably the only person right now in Australia who's podcasting about this issue, or this topic kind of in this space. So it's actually been amazing in that all the people, and it's a hugely growing industry and there's so much momentum behind it. And everyone's kind of getting directed to my podcast, to find out more or to hear these influential speakers, because I just, the timing was great. And I was probably the first one who did it. And I still am. Like, another guy, is about to start one up soon. But until now, I've kind of had the platform to myself. So I've people have contacted me in that space saying, I love what you're doing. Like, let's meet up when you're in Melbourne, or let's do this. And so it's been amazing. I couldn't have imagined that it would open up these opportunities for me.
And I think that early mover advantage is important as well. Just being the first on the scene can give you a huge, a huge momentum that otherwise might be harder to get, or traction, I suppose. I guess what I'm wondering though, and this is, me wanting to kind of, I suppose, coach you a bit too, is I think that the way that it's working now, the podcast is helping to, as you've said, to build your profile in the industry, to rebuild your credibility and authority. I think it's giving you a lot of confidence as an influencer. I mean, I know because of, our relationship, I know you've been down to Melbourne recently and met up with lots of people in that industry as you were all attending a conference and stuff, like things like that I think you would have done before, but I think there was a level of confidence and assertiveness that you took to it. Yeah, which is fantastic. Yep. I guess my question is, and I see the Facebook groups that you're in are very much the people that are already in the industry. And I know that the clients that you want to work with are possibly wanting to explore plant-based, but might not be in a vegan Facebook group.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
So I guess the question there is, how do you see how the podcast will help you attract those clients, or are you comfortable with the podcast being your platform for growing your own profile, and the client attraction piece is less important at this stage?
I think the client attraction piece is a little less important to me at the moment, only because I've kind of, I think from building my confidence in this way, I think I've been better at going outside the online space to look for client stuff. So now I'm working much more closely with this cardiologist. So he's sending some clients my way. I'm collaborating with another man, and it's going to be like us holding physical workshops, and potentially holding retreats and those sorts of things. So I'm kind of focusing my client work, and we're thinking of doing like, I guess a sort of a speaking circuit in local communities, to try and attract that clientele that way, because my target market is probably now an older target market, because it's, people who've had a heart attack or who have cardiac disease. They're not necessarily hanging out on Facebook. So I've actually been focusing a little bit more on the offline stuff in terms of the client attraction. So then I guess with the podcast, it's been, for me, the best thing about it has been, as you said, like building my profile, attracting people that want to collaborate with me on different projects and those sorts of things. So I think for the minute, that's how I'm happy to use the podcast for my business.
And I think that clarity on purpose is really great. Like I'm sure we talked at the start of our journey about, and I bang on a lot about it, about knowing why you're podcasting. But I always make the point that until you start, it won't evolve. And once you start, it will evolve. And it's so interesting to see how much your purpose for the podcast has shifted. Like that's incredible. And I think then the advice I would give you there is to really be thinking, well, if this podcast is it's it's already being considered a resource for the industry. I'm connecting with amazing influencers. It's bringing me bigger opportunities, and I'm becoming an influencer. I think then, like, well, how do we do more of what's working well? To continue to do that, to continue to grow your brand. And I guess I haven't seen your per episode numbers, but I'd encourage you to look at your per episode downloads and see if there are any that stand out as having been more popular than others over time. And that is sort of one of those simple things of look at what has worked and do more of that. So that would be an interesting analysis to do. And also, and I always say this, but I'm going to say it again, also the solo episodes and how you are using those to position your authority. And another way that you could think about doing this that isn't just a solo show but really puts you in the authority chair, I guess, is to think about whether you pick a topic and facilitate a little panel as a podcast episode. So maybe it's a heart disease based topic, or how plant-based can influence heart disease, and you have a doctor, and I don't know, an exercise physiologist, and you as the diet-based person, and you facilitate a panel where you're all bringing this expertise to the table, and you are putting yourself equal to the other members of the panel, and then you're creating this amazing piece of content because you are bringing multidisciplinary views in. I think that might be something that could work really well for you.
I love the idea of that. And so just from a practical sense, what would you do that on Zoom or something, so that you can all be like, I don't even know how that works on the tech side of things.
You could do it on Skype or Zoom. So I would suggest when you've got more than one other person on the end of the line, it's probably easier to begin with if you can see everyone. So I would probably do Skype with video, and you can do 3 people, or Zoom with video. Just so that you can all see each other and get cues from each other until you're, I think you might always want to do it that way. I have started doing these myself on Lady Boss chats, and we're using video because we're also releasing on YouTube, which is another thing you could think about doing if you're going to the effort of making a video. But it is a lot easier then to be able to see who's talking or signal silently to people, things like that. But the tech is exactly the same as what you're doing. You're just bringing an extra person in. And if you feel worried about the tech, you could do your first one as an in-person where you pick, 2 people who are local, and it could be one of these people you're collaborating with, or the doctor you're collaborating with, and actually try it where you're all sitting around a table together. That actually could be quite fun as well.
That's such a good idea. I really like that. Awesome.
And those sorts of episodes, I imagine, would be highly shareable within your niche, because they will be such a resource that brings so many perspectives to the table.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Cool.
Awesome. So I guess really I don't know that there's much more to say. I mean, we're not going to follow you forever. I will follow you forever.
Oh, why?
I've had a ball on this series, and I guess is there like if you think about that whole, because it's been about 6 months, you think about that, like what's the biggest learning or piece of joy that has come from this whole journey?
I think the biggest learning is like that you just if you think that something might be good for your business, like especially if you're in the early stages or wherever you're at, I guess, like just start. Like if I listen back to my first episodes compared to now, like you just need to start somewhere. And I think for me, having the Podwell course was such a good starting point because I was really scared about the tech, and I wanted to do a podcast. I had no idea where to begin. And this was like, I didn't even know if this, I had no idea what the end result was going to be. But it was like, okay, my next step is just to do the course. And then once I had, was even halfway through, I had started recording. So it wasn't this huge, overwhelming thing. So like I think if people are even thinking about podcasting, then they should just start and see where it takes them. Like, like you were saying before, I think it's not until you start that you can get clarity around it. Like I had no idea what this was going to do for my business or really even what the point was or whatever. I was just like, oh, I've been thinking about it. It sounds kind of fun. I really want to talk to more people in my business. So I'm just going to start. And that was the best thing I ever did. So I think just starting is, even if it's not perfect, is the way to go.
Yeah, I totally agree with that message. And I've seen it with you, I've seen it with me, I've seen it with lots and lots of clients that you can't move forward without starting. Like you can't evolve, you can't learn, you can't grow until we start. So I think that's a really awesome message to end on. And I want to thank you for doing this series with me and opening yourself and your journey up and letting people listen in on it. It's, I think it's a great piece of podcasting content for anyone who is thinking about going on the journey. So thank you, Anna.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been heaps of fun. I really appreciate it.
Yay. And obviously, I have referred in the show notes to links to find your website at annachisholm.com and also your podcast, which is called Big Impact and is in iTunes. And if you all haven't listened to it yet, definitely go and listen to it. But thank you, Anna.
Thanks, Katie.
Are you a podcaster who has been podcasting for a few months? You're over the tech hurdle, you've cleared the starting hurdle, and now you're kind of wondering, what next? How do I ensure my podcast craft is developing? How do I connect more with my audience and create a community around my brand? How do I connect with more influencers and develop lasting relationships with them? Well, my dear, Podcast Empire is the membership community for you. For $37 a month or $370 a year, you will get access to me and an intimate tribe of podcasting entrepreneurs. You'll get sharp strategy, laser-focused customer targeting, and epic brand building through the platform of your podcast. We do this through accountability with monthly goal setting, highly practical and tiny bite-sized trainings. We just looked at podcast rebrands and solo formats, and hot seat reviews of member podcasts. To see more and join, go to www.podcastempires.com. Join the empire.
We are at the end of our 5-part Should I Start a Podcast series with Anna Chisholm. I hope that you enjoyed this last and most recent episode. I had a ball catching up with Anna 6 months on from when we started this journey, if you can believe that. And how amazing are the changes that have happened in her business and the way that she talks about her business and talks about her role in her industry. It is a real honest to God example of what podcasting can do for you. So as usual, I want to share a couple of tips for the newbie podcaster and for you if you're a more experienced podcaster that you can take away from today's lesson. Firstly, tip for the newbies, and I think Anna said it best, just start. There's so much that will only come when you start. So even if you're not clear on a lot of things, just get started, and I promise you, and Anna promises you, that clarity will come. And if you want help and support on that journey, then come and join the Podwell podcasting course with access to the membership community so that you get live support along the way. I've obviously advertised it at the beginning of this episode, but I do encourage you, if you want support and you have enjoyed listening to this and you can hear the type of support that I offer and the way that I work with people and support them on their journey. So if that feels good and like a fit for you, then please come on in. I'd love to have you. And for the more experienced podcaster, I guess I'm imagining that you may have resonated with some of what you heard Anna talking about, particularly some of those evolutions and the changes in our business and the changes in the way we feel about our business. So I guess I wanted to really ask you to reflect on that. What has resonated with you? Where have you seen your podcast change and your business change, and how much of that has been one causing the other? You know, I love that Anna said there's been big changes in her business, and she ties that directly back to the podcast. What I would encourage you to do is exactly the same thing that I encouraged Anna to do, and that is to, now that you're clear on the purpose, and Anna's purpose was to really build her profile and influence in her industry, is your podcast helping you to do that? And how is it helping you? So are there some gaps? And there often are. I've just done a hot seat member review in the Podcast Empire community, and it's a common issue I see when I do these hot seat reviews is that the content that people are producing is not necessarily as tight as it could be to drive and achieve the purpose that you're setting out to achieve. So I encourage you to think about that. And if you would like me to hot seat your podcast, then the best way to do that, or the only way to do that, is to join the Podcast Empire membership community, which you would have heard an ad for that directly before this outro. We would love to have you there. We're a small community. I plan to grow the community this year. I haven't really hard launched it apart from talking about it on this series, and it will grow over 2017. But now, if you join now, you get a much smaller, much close-knit community where you get a lot more access to me, because there's not as many of you to share me around between. So if that interests you, do jump in or get in touch, and I hope to see you there. But regardless of whether you can, take up one of my programs, I really hope that this series has benefited you in some way, and I would love to know. You can tweet me at Katie T. Wyatt and let me know. I'm really interested to know if this series has interested you, if you've enjoyed hearing the real journey of somebody. Tell me. I'm dying to hear. But otherwise, have a great week. We'll be back to the normal transmission of the podcast next week with a fantastic interview with a guest or two guests who have been on the show before. The Merrymaker sisters were my very, very first guest on this podcast, and they're coming back. Their business has changed a lot, and they're coming back next week to share it with you all. Thanks, guys. Talk then.
Hey, we've loved contributing to your empire building today. Please share us with a fellow empire builder so that we can help them too. Thank you to Luke at The Wellness Pro for production and editing, the Virtually Holistic Hub for show notes and admin support, to our guest, and to you, our most important listener. You should also check out my other podcast, Lady Boss Chats, where Elle Roberts and I chat all things Lady Boss life. You'll feel like you've just pulled up a cozy armchair with your biz bestie. Find us in your favourite podcast app or at theladybossproject.com.